We are back talking SEC football here on Southeastern 16. I'm Chase Robinson. That is Jay Greeson. And we're going to spend some time today. Look, people like to talk about quarterbacks in the spring, quarterback battles. Well, we're going to go different position groups, different position battles going on, non-quarterbacks. We'll get to quarterbacks later on this spring. But look, we want to look at some of the position battles that are going on outside of the quarterback position because I think there's some pretty intriguing ones out there to look at this spring. So, Jay, I'll be kind. I'll let you go first. What is a position battle that you're looking at this spring?
Well, I think it really starts in Knoxville because I think we've talked and I know we just said that we'll talk quarterbacks later, and maybe Nico Imaliava is the most known guy in Knoxville, but the guy who drove that Tennessee football program to the playoffs last year was Dylan Sampson.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's an offense that I know Heupel likes to sling the ball around and they like to do a whole lot of things, but any high-flying offense is almost always built around a run first and run well mentality. And figuring out who's going to be the guy back there, I think, is job number one if Tennessee's going to be in a place to replicate last year's success.
No, most certainly. Like they've got to have a guy that they could lean on. And I thought we saw Nico run more confidently towards the end of the year. Where maybe we'll see that more this year. But no, I completely agree with you. They've got to have a guy back there. And kind of where I wanted to go in my first one, I wasn't sure when you started talking about Tennessee, because I had Tennessee written down as one too, but as the wide receiver position, because that's another position as well. Chris Brazel's the only receiver coming back that has any college experience. They have a lot of new faces when it comes to wide receiver, and Mike Matthews is a guy that he thought about going in the portal. He's staying. He'll be a guy. Amari Jefferson was a 4-star. Braylon Staley and true freshman Travis Smith, who all are good players, is just who are going to be the guys in this younger group that are going to step up for Nico to throw to. And so I think wide receiver and running back both, for a team that does have their quarterback kind of solidified at both the running back and wide receiver positions, are going to be fun to watch for Tennessee.
I completely agree. And look, you go into the spring and your first question mark is always going to be, do we have a quarterback we can trust? And there are a lot of teams in this league who would be happy to trade with Heupel because they don't know what their answer is at quarterback, and he does. And because I think Nico, great point by you about him starting to run a little more and being a little more active in the run opportunities, but there are a whole lot of skill position questions around that team and moving forward. And then conversely, a team that also overachieved last year in South Carolina, I mean, they have a quarterback that I believe is going to be really good. I think Lenore Sellers can be him long term over the next couple of years. But the straw that stirred the drink in Columbia was Kyle Kennard. And I don't know how you don't replace a guy who was an All-American and got that much postseason hardware, but you got to figure out a way to replicate the production, you know?
Yeah. There's no way around that. I mean, that's a lot of the success they had was because they had him. And so that's going to be huge for South Carolina. And again, I don't think it's someone who can replace. And they just started spring practice. I listened to a little bit of some of the things that Shane Beamer had to say, and I think that's what they're looking towards is trying to replicate the entire defenses last year, because I think you look at the defense as a whole, that was a huge part of, and yes, we like to talk about their offense, but that defense was a huge part of why they were in a lot of games, especially like a game like Alabama where they almost beat the Crimson Tide.
Well, I mean, to your point, they finished top 20 nationally in scoring defense, in yards per play, and against the run. Now, I think South Carolina hit a whole lot of home runs in the portal with guys like Brownlow Diddy from A&M. They got Sean Murphy from Florida State. So linebackers, I think they're going to be able to figure out and have some dudes back there. But that defensive front was just nasty.
Yeah, it was. It sure was. Another one I'm looking at, Jay, is the offensive line at Oklahoma, because that was a sketchy position all across the line last year. It was injuries left and right. They were having to put guys in and move guys around the line, and they've got. I know they got starting left tackle Logan Howland is back. Other than that, they've got a couple of transfers in, one from Western Carolina. They signed a freshman in the 25 class, Michael Fazuzzi. Hopefully I said that right. Who is the top offensive tackle in the class. And so they've got some young guys, but they've got to do something on that offensive line, especially when you got John Mateer coming in at quarterback. Again, this is an important year for Oklahoma. I think it starts up front for those guys, and they've got to figure something out on that offensive line, especially with a group of younger guys like they have.
Well, and I think it's not going to turn a whole lot of heads. You're not going to see the guys on ESPN or even a regular segment here on Southeastern 16 of days in the life of the offensive line and searching for depth and solid dudes you can trust up front. But your point is well made, and I think it's the exact same concern that Kirby Smart has after you lose 4 starters from last year. All eyes are going to be on Gunnar Stockton and the quarterback transition from Carson Beck to the new guy. And, of course, there's going to be questions and conversations about who's going to be the skill position guys. But when you lose an All-American in Tate Ratledge, a multi-year starter in your center in Jared Wilson, as well as both tackles, I mean, it is – Gunnar Stockton can't make a single play if he's on his back.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, I don't think people realize like how important it is. And I think people that know football do, but those who just watch say, oh, Gunnar Stockton, whatever, focus on the quarterbacks. Well, it starts up front. And I think it brings up a good point there with Georgia. And do you feel like Georgia, and again, Kirby can crank out some talent. He can reload. But do you feel like offensively this Georgia team, because I'm having a hard time figuring out just looking up another roster right now, are there more holes, do you feel like, for Georgia this year compared to other years, especially offensively?
Well, I think one, to go anti-Reader's Digest, in other words, to make a short story long, I think one of the big reasons that Saban finally walked away was because of NIL opportunities were going to hurt his ace in the hole, which was him as a recruiter. And Saban was eternally underrated as a talent evaluator because he very rarely missed on recruits. And I think Kirby learned a lot from Saban in regards to the recruiting and the talent evaluation. But now with the portal and with the NIL, those teams that were always 2 and 3 deep with 5 stars are going to lose those guys because they're going to go cash in now.
Yeah.
I think Georgia is going to be facing that down the road where, as opposed to losing in Nakobe Dean and then bringing in the guy who went number 1 overall to Jacksonville, whose name just flew out of my head, right after him, and then replenishing, and they'll still have 2 or 3 defensive guys. They've got 5 stars waiting in the wings, but they just don't have as many. So if you miss on a guy, or a guy transfers, or a guy leaves early, the avalanche of depth that was the hallmark of Saban's dynasty and was the foundation around which Kirby built in the national championship years is going to get eaten a little bit by everybody else being willing to pay your backups. I mean, it's like in the NFL, in when the Eagles win the Super Bowl, they've got to let cornerbacks go. They've got to let meaningful pieces go because you can't pay everybody. So we're now starting to see that in college. And I think Georgia's going to suffer to that. I'm not going to say it's just a pilfering of talent, if you will.
Yeah. No, yeah, that's an excellent point you made there. Another position I'm looking at is at Texas A&M, and it's a position to me, wide receiver last year, they had some guys, they were not a big play team, and they relied a lot on the run game. They went out and got like 4 receivers, a couple of tight ends out of the portal, Casey Concepcion being one of those, North Carolina State, Micah Hudson is coming. But I feel like finding their guys at receiver, their big play guys is really intriguing to me this spring, because I feel like they've got to be multidimensional this year if they want to win games. They're not going to have the stout running back room like they did. They have some guys coming back, but they have got to get some receivers, some solid, consistent receivers in there. I think that's an important position battle this year there at A&M.
I completely agree. And I think just about everybody in the country at least inquired about the Concepcion kid who was, despite all the injuries NC State had at quarterback last year, that guy produced, man.
Yeah.
And which kind of leads me back to the state of Alabama. Auburn got one of the most coveted portal receivers too in the Eric Singleton from Georgia Tech. But I think all eyes in Lee County during spring practice are going to certainly be about who takes a step forward at quarterback, but we're not talking about quarterbacks. I will say Auburn must find the replacement for Jarquez Hunter, who I think was not only underutilized but underrated last year. I think that's going to be a guy who's going to get in the league, and you look up and he's getting 15 to 20 carries a game for somebody.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is kind of what he should have been doing last year.
Absolutely.
With the number of carries was a little low in most of the games last year for Auburn. And I'm interested to see the receivers at Auburn too, because seeing, especially with Singleton coming in, what that kind of does for that group. Again, if you can get a quarterback in there that can consistently get it to some of these receivers, that'd be a game changer for Auburn.
Absolutely. And in truth, you talked about the question marks on the perimeter in Knoxville. What would Josh Heupel give to have a Singleton, a Cam Coleman, a Malcolm Simmons? I mean, Auburn's going to have multiple weapons on the perimeter. It's just, can anybody get them the football?
Yeah. Yeah, big question mark there. And we'll get to quarterbacks position. But look, there's a lot of quarterback battles, I feel like, this year going into SEC football. So we'll talk about those very soon. But those are just a few position battles that we're looking at as a spring practice rolling across the SEC. We've got you covered here on Southeastern 16. Hit that subscribe button if you have not already. Share it with your friends. Like this video. We've got basketball, baseball content rolling out as well as our football content. We will see you again very soon for more SEC football talk here on Southeastern 16.